and we want to go kind of over our history, what we've been doing, and then how we completely changed it this year. And I think things are finally looking up from the brewery. Now, when we started in Hills Brewery, it was 2013. A friend of ours had decided he wanted to start a brewery. He rented an industrial space, cheap rent, and then
cheap and dirty.
Cheap and dirty, and then he realized that getting a license, especially down in KZN, is a very long, painful process, and he needed help. And so, after plying us with lots of beer, convinced us that it was a good idea for us to get involved, and we fell for it. So, I mean, and as you can see here, this was us, I think, as we were bottling our first batch of beer that we ever did.
We were licensed at this stage, but we were still bottling with the bottle one.
Bottle one. You can see the bucket up on the shelf. We'd fill up a 25-litre bucket and lift it up onto the shelf. And, well, we did this on a shoestring budget. All told, I think rent for those first few years was probably 60 or 70% of our costs. We made a brewery out of donated stainless steel. We found pots. I mean, I bought a 300-litre stainless steel drum for 1,000 rand. That saw us through the first few years. Our next setup, coming in the next slide, we made a chiller out of copper pipe. That thing is ugly as hell, but it worked.
Then we chill about 300 litres of beer.
It would take us about an hour to chill 300 litres of beer, but it did it. I put it together for about $1,000, and copper and swearing.
Did you like the pain for the swearing?
The pain and blood. It burns. Next, our original, and now, here's the thing, people always say get stainless, and yes, we do have stainless fermenters now, but Megan got gold for your Schwarz beer, and silver for your Schwarz beer in those plastic bastards.
Fermented at 18 degrees.
Fermented at 18 degrees.
So it's totally possible.
Yes, and again, we kept it cheap and dirty.
Not on the inside.
Clean on the inside and dirty on the outside. Yes. Anyone who looked at our brewery would have been like, how do you not produce endless infections? But we have a microbiologist here, so we knew how to keep the important parts utterly sanitized. Yes. And for those of you who ever want to start a brewery, plastic can be fine, but if you ever get an infection in one of those, that's a month of hard chlorine. No, you can survive. I had a horrible infection in one of the things, and we just soaked it. Yeah, the cold room broke. Well, it did the reverse of break. It stopped staying at 18 and cooled everything down to 2, including fermentation. Killed the yeast. We brought it back up. We thought the yeast would probably come back to life. Something else did. But yes, you fill that up with chlorine. You then boil water it. You fill it up with chlorine again, and caustic it, and those fermenters carried on going. And the next.
We would normally not have even shown you these pictures because we were very ashamed of the setup. But now we've got a beautiful setup, so now we don't care about all that.
And this was where we stored kegs. It was so bad that Megan used to have to climb over the kegs to get the things at the back at that time. And there is our free stainless steel, and that was just donated to us for a few beers. That made our second brewery. That could do our 500-litre batches, all done on gas. We still made it. In this photo, you can see in the background, we'd already done the upgrade on the fermenters, because we actually had something pretty there. And it was us starting to try and improve things. Now, I think we'll stop with the slides for now. What we had here was a brewery that started off cheap, but the rent kept going up each year. The place didn't improve, it wasn't under our control. We actually had a landlord who we paid the lights and water to, who then never paid the local municipality. We used to get our electricity, the entire complex that we were in would get its electricity cut off And then sometime at around midnight, some guy would come and reconnect it. It was a constant battle. We even had lost water for a week at one point. And it's hard to run a brewery if you can't know that you're going to have your electricity on. You know, it's fine when the breweries we've got have finished fermentation and they're kind of dying down. But I mean, we had that at least once where like electricity was just off.
Yeah, so just before Clarence Beer Fest, I've done all of these special brews. And I think it was about 3 weeks before Clarence Beer Fest, and our electricity had been brought. Now municipalities were properly clamped down, and rightly so. They had the ships, and they took pieces out of the connection so that they couldn't be played legally. And we were off for a week without electricity, and so of course I couldn't keep my pigs full. Clarence Beer Fest was moving. Thank goodness for the local butcher, because my pigs had to get shoved in between his hanging meat and stuff, because I had to keep my pigs full. And thank goodness for him, because he essentially kept my pigs, good for Clarence. And for a whole week, you haven't got any power. You can't run a business. And we were still paying about 15,000 rand rent, and impossible to do.
I think the previous year's Clarence, I did a brew one day before we were going to go to Clarence. It was my Baltic Porter. Now that's a lager, and it needs to ferment at 12. And as I was starting the chilling process, the power got cut off. And we ended up, I think, driving to a friend's house and getting a generator so we could run the pumps to get it into the fermenter. Except it was at 18 degrees by the time we were finished doing that, and we were like, what are we going to do? And the next day we've got to go to Clarence, and we came back the next day, the power was still off. We packed everything onto the trailer, ready to go to Clarence, and I was just like, I'm going to have to throw 300 litres of, 7.5% beer away when we get back. And as we were leaving, the power came back on, and we were like, oh, I hope it cools down fast enough. But we had a giant milk chiller that could get those fermenters cold. One of the things of how we chose to do this brewery that we really struggled to sell beer at it. We couldn't really sell beer. If you look on the right there, we did have a few tap days. We thought about trying to have the kind of tap day concept that like Agars does, where people come and set up gazebos and everyone comes around and drinks, and that's awesome because you're there, you're selling your beer straight from there. That's when you make your profit. But we really we didn't even have ablutions in our factory. There was like shared ones for the entire complex around the corner, and that was terrible. So we did this a handful of times, but it just wasn't going to work.
Saying that, we had everyone that attended those tap days, which was a large number of people, loved those tap days. Yeah. For them, that is what craft is. That is what starting your own business is. It's like you going to the crux of it. Yes, it was an industrial complex and it was ugly, but they loved our beers. They loved what we were doing. They loved how hard we were working to make the brand work. On a shoestring budget, we took no loans from anyone. We don't owe the bank anything. We took all of the money to fund the brewery from our own salary and savings. So as much as it was a shithole, people still loved what we were doing. And then loved that we were trying so hard to make it work. And we have. I mean, how many years later is
still going?
But we'll get on to the
one of the other things was, again, when you're only selling to a few pubs and bottle stores, your markup, your margins are very, very low, and our rent was getting bigger and bigger. It was starting to get hard. We had to do these tap days. We also did a lot of events. We got into the trail running scene. So when at the trail runs, we sold a lot of beer. The people are very thirsty at the end of those runs. But we had no weekends. I mean, once you've gone full time with the brewing, you're working Monday to Friday in the brewery getting things working, and then we're off to an event, off to another event. There were times where we hadn't had a weekend in months, and we were starting to burn out. And you combine that with the stress of your landlords not paying the lights,
and having to pay that huge amount of rent,
and having to pay that ever increasing amount of rent, and you start to lose the joy. It's killing it for us. So we've been asked 2 years ago, I think, by a friend of ours who owns 1000 Hills Chess School to join up with him. And at the time, I think Stefan from Little Wolf had just had his not great experience with Devil's Peak, where he sold his brewery, moved in with them, and then got told 6 months later, we don't want you anymore, bye. And we, having had seen that happening, we were like, oh, we want our independence. But I think it was something Lucas said, it's about ego, you want to do it yourself. And when he was talking about that yesterday, really, that actually rang true. It's about ego.
And be stubborn.
And being stubborn, yes.
We'll make this work.
But beginning of this year, before COVID actually, we finally just realized that this was killing us. And so we had to move out. And that's all the mess. And we even took our cold room with us.
That's Christopher!
That's good.
The walk-in bridge.
That cold room is sitting on a platform in the field in my property right now. But and so we moved to somewhere much better next month. Wait for it. Our final goodbye photo. After we cleared everything out.
It was bittersweet. We were sad to be going because we worked so hard for so many years to try and make it work, and also the excitement of the new start and the awful place. The little beer, the last beer.
Last year we had.
That beer was one of the first breweries. I found it tapped in the background when we were busy packing. I think it was from 2014.
Yeah.
That was a good send-off for our little hurrah.
And so now
This is what
we've got. So 1,000 Mil Chef School. It's a chef school, but they have they're open on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They have a restaurant so that the chefs get actual real-world training. They have an amazing menu. If you can go to the next slide, I think we have some food picks. There we go. During lockdown, we decided, I think it was Beth that we finally went to Trevor and said, okay, is that office still open? And he was like, hell yes. You can move in any time you want. And
for Trevor, it was a win-win for all of us. Because one, we gaining a tap room, we gaining a restaurant. Because that was the other thing. When before COVID, before all of that, we knew that we had to move out of that bank. So we had to make a decision. So either we pack it in completely and call it a day, we try our best. We go and find another premises that is safer and prettier and we have a little tap room in there, or we go and, I don't know, sell kidneys and buy a brew cup and figure out how to run a kitchen. Dion's an IT, I'm a scientist, I don't know the first thing about hospitality at all.
I'm 100% sure we would have screwed up through that.
We would have, and we would have been broke. We would have still not savings and it would have been messy. So that is really wasn't an option. And then as Dion says, when the Trevor option it made complete sense.
Once we came to our tent.
So as I say, we gained a restaurant, we gained a tap room. We have the cooperative concept where any upgrades in the brewery now are split 3 ways. Just general maintenance. Having each other to kind of bounce ideas off, taste each other's beers, make sure that we're constantly improving each other's beers. It's just one happy family. And of course, there's always going to be a risk with partnerships, always. But honestly, from where we've come from to where we're going, this is just amazing. And we've been there almost 6 months now, and it's just been the best.
It would have been longer, but lockdown actually stopped us moving.
And the one thing that I didn't mention, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but as much as we're dissing our original concept of the brewery and where it was and all of that, because we didn't have access to a good tap room and on-site sales, we pushed our direct sales hard, and that's what kept us going. So direct customers, straight deliveries to their doors, bottle sales almost entirely. We had the pub in Hilton that we had tax and then of course events, but most of our sales were bottle sales direct to people. So when the lockdown and alcohol ban happened, we did some pre-sales, so no alcohol sales, but we sold mixed packs of beers. Some of you even supported us doing that. So you had money coming into your bank account, and as soon as the alcohol ban was lifted, they got shipped. And then again,
that was actually perfect for us because we emptied our cold room.
Yes.
And that week, like the weekend before they allowed alcohol sales again, we came in and we were just boxing beers the whole day. We had a wall of boxed beers, and the curry guys, I think it was curry guys, just came and we were just tripping that week.
So the bottle sales, and having that, the huge customer base for bottle sales and direct sales was not just given to lockdown. Well, I don't know if we would have survived it, because we were still having to pay rent to that guy during lockdown, because our stuff was still in. So that's the direct sales would be amazing. And even now, we've got an extra tap room, but we've got such a huge client base this Friday. We've got our WhatsApp group now, and that's an awesome concept, and that's something you should probably consider as a commercial brewery. Yes, have your website where you guys can say buy and it's all automated online, but having a little WhatsApp group, close group, none of this random dancing that we'll get to the sick of, close group where you yourself can post and nobody else can. You say, listen, I'm brewing this special beer, double IPA, it's going to be released on Friday, get your people, it's not direct message. And I promise you, I'll send a message like that, and it will be sold before the day's even done. And then you start getting your deliveries. And you have a little joining code, and every week somebody else is joining this WhatsApp group. And it just slowly goes. And then what you do at an event, you have your little tablet or your cell phone, and you can have a sign-up page, and others can sign up to your WhatsApp group so that they can constantly get updates about you, the crews that are coming through, or even just your standard range of beers. And it's just, people constantly need to be reminded about your brand, about what stuff you've got. Otherwise they forget and they think, oh shit, it's Friday, I need beer, go straight to the bottle store and they get whatever's closest. But if you're being reminded once a week that you've got to do direct deliveries to their doorstep or to their office, they're going to buy them, and they do.
No, it's the one, I mean, you fill up the bucky now with boxes of beer when you're doing what would have been a handful of kegs off to Crossways becomes a handful of kegs and another 10 crates of beer.
So if you're making a trip, so if you're doing deliveries to a certain spot in Joburg, send out the word that you're going to be doing deliveries, and then you're basically paying for that trip with all these extra little deliveries. And perhaps you've got a mate that's in the centre of Joburg, and you can tell us he has a pickup point, Oaks and Joburg. I know the legal aspects is a little bit hazy there because in theory, distribution and picking up beer from someone's office, but I don't think anyone's so, yeah, that for us has been huge.
The one other thing, and again, this year, it's been about having to change on the fly and make a plan. I mean, we came out of the original lockdown, we got out of the brewery, got moved in, and then immediately got that with immediate effect speech from Cyril, and we were like, oh, Trevor had ripped out the entire, during the original lockdown, ripped out the entire brewery, I mean not brewery, the restaurant, installed this new lovely new bar. This bar goes all the way down, it's beautiful, and we were just moved in and not allowed to sell alcohol. That's when, your speech yesterday where you did the alcohol-free beer, so we can at least have something on tap. I did the 3 months tea, but also we started doing the word sales, and we didn't think it would do so well. But I mean, you did a 300 liter batch, 360, all out the door in buckets. You grew up the yeast, so you just produced essentially guys bought their buckets. The rule was you had ready to supply the bucket, we weren't going to supply that. But you grew up the yeast, and the guys would come, pick up their bucket, they have a little jar with the right amount of yeast in, take it home, toss the yeast in, Ragnarok. Keep it nice and easy. And off they went. And
that's something I'm going to carry on doing. So if I'm going to brew 300 liters on my Schwarzbier, add an extra 200 onto that. That's going to pay for my Schwarzbier brew. That's an extra bonus. And you know what, even if it's 50 liters, still, 50 liters is something that you never sold. So add a little tap jar of yeast or whatever, and they're good to go. And people are loving it. The one guy said to me, it's the first time in Asia, and of course this was over kind of lockdown we're still going to brew. But it's just an extra batch that, pushes the boat a little bit. And also it's good for people who want to get into brewing and are a little bit scared. Yes, you normally would start in the beginning and do like an extra. They're starting at the end and getting the work and just pushing the yeast and doing the bottling. But you know what, it's a really good place to learn. Chances are they'll get a contaminant-free beer. It's well fermented with half the yeast. Obviously the bottling side needs to be clean. But it's been a really, really nice learning curve for people, and we found that a lot of people are now buying grain from me that they would not normally have done, because they want to now do the first part of the step and see if they can do the full thing. So, yeah, that's been really fun.
I think people are lacking the idea of also us doing a batch of our beer, our recipe, and then they getting to ferment a portion of it themselves. So they'll know, like when you did the Schwarz beer, they'll know that that's the Schwarz beer. It's the same one that's coming out of the tap, but they'll see the difference because they fermented it at home. Probably was not a different yeast. I mean, again, there was an Osmo pitch we gave. But it definitely, all of these things help build like a relatively small but a growing group of people who love our brand and have happily come along with us in the move sort of thing. So, those people who loved us in Maritzburg, because we were Maritzburg's only brewery, are still buying from us even though we're no longer Maritzburg, now Maritzburg is Brewery this again. But they're still buying those beers from us because they're getting that personal touch.
I think